The third thing I'll say, as far as just a tip for a direction to go for an affirmative, I've found over the years that whether it's a security assistance policy, or topic, whether it's a military topic, or a change foreign policy topic, if you can find a good affirmative that has to do with intelligence sharing between security agencies, you can often say that things like that are done covertly, which means that it's difficult for the negative to get a link to anything based on perception, such as relations, such as politics. It often doesn't cost much money. I mean, we're already gathering the intelligence anyway, so if we share it with another agency, that's not something we have to spend a lot of money to do. You can get into some case-specific disadvantages about leaking our security assets, leaking our security assets, that they are no longer secure once you've done that, and that there's exploitation and espionage that goes on. But what I was looking at is possibly about computer hacking and about cyber warfare. Now, I have not looked far enough into this to find that there are exactly the solvency cards you need to write your plan. And one concern I have is you might find that intelligence sharing really is not much of the problem, that there are other sort of law enforcement things that need to be done, that what we really need probably is an extradition treaty for that particular area of crimes, because as I understand it, our extradition relations with Russia are pretty sketchy. But if you found something that it would be very good to share intelligence on, and in particular, the cards talking about Russian hackers and how Russian hackers are some of the most skillful ones and have gotten through all sorts of layers of security, and then the cards talking about cyber warfare and about military experts who say this is the way the next war is going to be fought. You can have a slick little affirmative, and it's possible that a good hacking or cyber warfare affirmative would not use intelligence sharing as the mechanism and could still be very strategic. It's possible that an intelligence sharing affirmative could have a different harm area and still be very strategic. But I would look at those, and if you could make those two come together, you might be onto something that's really good. As far as negative strategy, with a topic that gives you this little guidance as to what to expect, that's a challenge. I really put down only 4 possibilities, and you can see how far you get with this. First of all, there's triangular relations with China. The neat thing about this argument is you can start off in the first negative if you shell and extend, which really is, I think, probably the best way to really develop a negative strategy, to take the block and go deep on what the 2AC had to say, and then the 2NR be able to go for second line extension and really clean up the affirmative's second chance at trying to explain what their position is. With that said, if your position in the first negative is that it's good for us to keep the delicate balance we have right now with our relations with Russia and with China and with playing them off one another, then there's something very neat that you can do. You can take a risk in the first negative and say, what the plan would do is it would improve our relations with Russia, and that's bad because as we draw nearer to Russia, that makes China feel that we are ganging up on them and it throws the balance off. Now, if the affirmative is cagey, like I've talked about with some of these affirmative possibilities, and they say, actually, no, we would really hurt relations with Russia. Well, with the balance argument, you can say, that doesn't turn our argument, that's a link to our argument, because we're saying in the status quo, it is finely balanced, and all 3 nations feel like they're successfully playing their 2 rivals off each other. But if you hurt our relations with Russia, you drive them into the arms of China, and that throws the balance off as well. And then you just read additional impact evidence and say, those aren't link turns, those are links. So that's something, it's not really that hard to find articles written about the triangular relationship between the United States and China and Russia. There may be fewer of them written than there used to be, but if you go to that Foreign Affairs article and check it out, and then maybe check out whatever is footnoted in that Foreign Affairs article, you could probably make that argument come together. The second thing you might want to look into, and this is obvious, and this probably should happen on every topic no matter what, is a politics disadvantage. It'll be right after, when things get started in January, it'll be right after the midterm elections have happened, so there'll be something new going on in Washington, D.C., and that's something that you'll have to update every week. But one thing that occurred to me you might want to check out, this may seem obvious to you, but I'm going to go ahead and point it out, is that through the whole season of debating the health care bill, there were a lot of people bringing up as an image, bringing up socialism, and in particular bringing up Russia. And there were people who asked at one time, why does Obama have so many czars? This is just another hint that Obama, deep down, is a socialist and that his loyalties and his sympathies really lie with Russia. So you might, if you went digging for evidence on the Tea Party and how they feel about socialism and how they feel about Russia, you might be able to find some good articles talking about how Russia is kind of a scare word and about how conspiracy theories will just kind of cluster, they'll kind of condense over anything that hits the news that the Obama administration is doing something different in its policies with Russia. That you've got too many people out there who are very ready to believe anything that they hear that involves the word Russia and Barack Obama, that they're too ready to believe that it's got to be something damaging for the United States. Now, the trick is going to be to try to find uniqueness evidence that says that those factions are not mobilized right now, that they're not really at a boiling point. And I think that if I heard this argument, if I was affirmative and that was a negative strategy, one of the things I'd be staking a lot of my hope on is winning. Well, they're about as mobilized as they can get. You know, they've already taken down a couple of incumbents in primary challenges, and that's a real difficult thing to do in this country. So it's not really possible to get them more mobilized than they are. But if the only thing standing between you and a good useful generic is finding good uniqueness evidence, that might be worth going and looking for. A third thing. This is an argument that probably will get better and more useful as you move toward the end of the season. In July, that's the deadline for us to begin pulling out of Afghanistan. And what you can do sometimes, these are not the best arguments in the world, but if you get lucky and find very good evidence on it, and sometimes this evidence is written, sometimes people will make the kind of helpful comments that provide evidence for this, this can be really useful. What I'm talking about is a focused trade-off argument. That our people in the State Department, that our overseas diplomatic operatives are stretched to the limits, that we're pouring all the resources we can into trying to negotiate and trying to reach some kind of sustainable set of improvements, purging corruption, improving the security forces, trying to get Afghanistan to stand up on its own 2 feet so that we can realistically begin withdrawing troops. Because if we don't start withdrawing, then political support for the intervention is likely to crumble and we'll have to withdraw rapidly, and that'll be a disaster. So what does the affirmative do? The affirmative, by making a big change toward Russia, they pull away people who otherwise would be on top of things in Afghanistan. And the thing is, as you get toward the end of the season, you get down to where, you know, there's only 8 weeks left until this pullout is supposed to begin. There's only 6 weeks left until this pullout is supposed to begin, and that argument just gets better and better and better. The further out from the pullout you are, it's actually kind of a hard argument to win, but it's worth going and looking for the evidence, because week to week, as the situation in Afghanistan gets better or gets worse, you might find some of the cards that help you with focus. So what you do there is you go into books and sometimes journal articles talking about diplomats, talking about State Department staff, about how their budget is often very cut to the bone, about how there are not nearly as many of them as there ought to be, and so they have to really stretch their resources pretty thin, and how when unexpected policy changes are announced from Washington, D.C., they get pulled off problems they've been working on for a very long time, and it throws a monkey wrench into everything, and then you try to find evidence that says that in Afghanistan, we're putting just about everything we got into trying to make Afghanistan work. And we're pulling people off of other countries to try to get them into Afghanistan. And you'll sometimes even get people who are working in Afghanistan who say, we've got to focus on this. We cannot allow ourselves to get distracted. And then you just have to explain the scale of what the affirmative is trying to do is necessarily going to pull back some of the resources that we're trying to pour into Afghanistan. And then you can win whatever the impact is of Afghanistan falling apart. Last one. On any foreign policy topic, you need some kind of spending argument, some kind of foreign aid trade-off argument. You're not going to use it that often because there are too many cagey affirmatives that are going to find something to do that either doesn't cost any money at all, or they can prove that an immediate effect of the plan is to unlock money that's committed elsewhere, so they can win that there's not a link to it. But there will be some affirmatives that are just a good idea, but one of the best ways into the debate is to talk about spending money and what the consequences are. So taking the time to update whatever spending arguments you've used in the past, or to go and look and see, given the current political situation, is there a good aid trade-off argument? Is there a good aid argument, or a good aid program that's on the chopping block, to where if there came a demand for more foreign aid, it would likely result in that program getting cut? If you put in the time to come up with a spending argument of that nature, that's something that you'll get some mileage out of the year. So, without a lot of guidance from the topic, because it's not real clear where it's going to go, those are my suggestions. Something systemic, maybe the pharmaceuticals affirmative, maybe the intelligence sharing and or the hacking and cyber warfare. And as far as negative strategies, big and broad spectrum, and then you just got to watch, keep your ears open, gather all the intelligence you can, and see which way the topic develops. And that ought to set you up, at least for the beginning of the season.